So I wanted to make a video that discusses the term queer. This is a term that's increasingly used in the LGBT community, and it kind of exists as a sort of umbrella term, sometimes to refer to lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgender, the whole of the rainbow spectrum as such. But more so, it's being used as a way for people who can't identify themselves with a specific label to kind of cling on to and say, look, I'm queer. I'm not necessarily labelling myself as gay or straight or bisexual, I'm queer, I have a fluid and open sexuality or gender identity. And it's strange for me because in many ways this concept of queer and queerness should be right up my street. It's great to overthrow labels, it's great to not be defined by things, and it's great to kind of break these stereotypes. I really don't believe in if you're a woman you have to do this, if you're a man you have to do this, and you have to act in specific ways. Same thing with being gay. I don't believe that being a lesbian means that you must act in a specific way or conform in any way to a label or a stereotype. However, I just feel that this word queer is becoming saturated into the LGBT movement, and the truth is, I don't like it. That's not to say I don't like queer people or those who identify as queer. Of course, that's not the case. But what the term kind of come to represent, I don't really get. First of all, it is a derogatory term that historically was used to kind of oppress and discriminate against gay people. If I'm walking down the street hand in hand with my girlfriend and someone looks at us and shouts out, "Queers!" probably not going to be perceived in a liberating way by myself. It's actually going to be a form of discrimination. So the fact that we've taken this word and we've kind of reclaimed it as something wonderful, and you see it a lot in pride parades, in any kind of debate and discussion of LGBT, it's often LGBTQ. This Q's kind of been shoved onto the end of the LGBT movement. But I don't really want the word queer to be within our movement and to be pushed as this new liberating experience for those who don't identify with a particular label. If you don't identify with a particular label, say that your sexuality or your gender identity is fluid. But to use this word queer, I get that some people like reclaiming words, but for me, I just think it's all a bit unnecessary. It's the same with the N word for black people, is how I can relate it. There's many black people who find using that word a form of brotherhood or sisterhood, and they find it liberating and they love to reclaim that word. There's many other black people who find it hugely offensive and want it left in the, kind of chains and squalors of history. So although I get the whole reclaiming thing, I'm not really down with it. There's plenty of lesbians that call themselves dyke. It's actually kind of a classification. I identify as a dyke because I dress this way and I pursue sexual relationships in this way and I embody my sexuality this way. That's fine, but why would you want to use the term dyke, which is kind of, once again, historically oppressive word for gay women? I just don't get it. And I'm sure this video will get quite a few dislikes. Believe me, I am not sat here on my high horse dictating who can and cannot be defined in what way, and of course it's up to you how you define yourself, and if queer and what that word embodies you feel defines you, then that's your prerogative to use it. However, I think that we are alienating ourselves a lot from the world around us, from the straight community, if you can call it a community, from the general populace. People understand what gay means, they understand what bisexual means, they're increasingly understanding what transgender means, but all this kind of queer, non-binary, skewing of boundaries and lines, it's really confusing everybody. It's really kind of taking kind of the rainbow with all its specific colours and just kind of making the paint run into kind of a myriad, I'm just using ridiculous words now, it's just making the paint run, okay? I've recently written an article for the Huffington Post, so I'll put the link below, check it out, all about why I identify as gay and not queer and why I don't really like this term queer. And in the article I've actually put the LGBT movement has now been extended, this is the extent of it, to LGBTQQIAA, meaning lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, transsexual, two-spirited, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual. People can't keep up. And I would say if I perhaps was queer and I had a queer sexuality or an identity of sorts and I didn't really define myself according to one label, I'd like to think that I would just say that I'm bisexual or I have a fluid sexuality. And I guess for me, the whole queer identity is something that made me feel excluded from kind of the LGBT movement. It's this very peculiar, as the term is meant to mean, queer means peculiar, way of expressing oneself. And I hate saying that because it sounds discriminatory. I really do believe that we should all be able to express ourselves in whatever way we wish, but this kind of queer association with the gay movement, it just doesn't suit me, and it doesn't suit a lot of people like me. I like lines and boxes, and I like sometimes moving lines and breaking boxes and changing stereotypes, but unfortunately I need my box or my label of lesbian. It identifies me, and I appreciate that if I couldn't identify with that, that's fine, but I would just assume that I'd call myself bisexual if I was attracted to both genders. I don't really understand why we need the term queer, and when people interrogate someone who is queer and said, what does that mean? They just say, well, it doesn't really mean anything. It can mean a number of things. Nobody can understand what's going on anymore. Nobody knows fully who they are. Everybody is queer. Even the straightest heterosexual person on the planet is queer. We all have queer lives and identities and experiences, and the way in which we kind of interact with the world around us is constantly changing. I'm probably not going to look like this or be the same person I am now in 5, 10, 20 years' time. Does that mean I have a queer life? I can't identify with who I was strongly 10 years ago because I've changed so much. My desires, my wants, my needs have changed. So maybe I am queer to some extent. I think everybody is. But at the same time, I don't necessarily want to be a part of an LGBTQAAS. It's just going on and on. I'm just gay. And as much as I might stand in, you know, brotherly or sisterly love with people who are queer or people who are transgender, those struggles are so different to the one I am on. And unfortunately, because of how the media interpret it, we all get meshed together under the same umbrella. And I've never really understood why that is the case. So would I rather see the term queer gone? Yes, I do find it derogatory. I find it unnecessary. I also find it quite elitist. It seems to be quite a middle class term, owned by middle class people who have had the privilege of understanding or engaging with queer studies. It doesn't really belong to the working classes. So I think we need to move away from that and just get back to kind of core reasoning. I am gay, I am bisexual, I don't label myself, I'm fluid. That's fine, but I'm queer, I'm a dyke. What do you think that says to straight people? It's so confusing and it's so unnecessary. Let's move away from the derogatory terms and just stick to what makes sense, to what is rational and understood by people around us. So please write your comments below. It's great if you disagree with me. I fully appreciate the arguments from the other side. So write them below so that everyone can read them. Thank you very much for listening. Peace.